FPLSociety.com presents a Premier League Draft Fantasy Podcast. Welcome to the Key Pass Collective. Your exclusive source for the information, analysis, and advice you need to dominate your fantasy leagues. Come on in. We've been expecting you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Key Pass Collective. Thank you so much for joining us for another Draft 101 segment. Again, this is a series that is designed to introduce you to the draft game, the draft fantasy football game. If you missed the first in this series, go back and take a listen. It is basically first Draft 101. What is draft fantasy football? If you've always been wondering, if you've always been wanting to play, that's where you want to start. That's that first episode where you want to start. Explains the game to you. Give it a listen, and then come on back to this one. Let me introduce myself. My name is Joe Williams. I'll be your host here today and for the rest of this Draft 101 series. I'm also the regular host on the Key Pass Collective, when normally we do have, segments and shows that are more sort of analytical, talking about trades, talking about drafts, talking about pickups, and we have several analysts who are normally on the show with me. But for this series, it's just me, and you and I will get to know this game together. So again, welcome in, and I'm so excited that you are interested and wanting to learn more about this draft game. This is a game that we all love. It becomes an obsession. Doesn't have to, but oftentimes it does. And it's something that we're pretty passionate about here. We think that the draft game is really just a fantastic way to play. It fosters community, especially between league members. You know, if you don't find yourself getting too competitive, getting too wrapped up into things, taking things personally, it can really bring a league together. A lot of just fun banter, and a lot of just getting to know people that sometimes maybe you wouldn't have spoken to that often if you guys weren't in a fantasy league together. So we highly recommend it. Plus, the Twitter community is amazing. Hashtag DraftPL, hashtag DPL, or just look up EPL Draft on Twitter. It's a vibrant, incredible community on there. So I would encourage you to also get involved on that. And I talk about that extensively in the first episode as well. But today, we are here to talk about how/where do you play draft fantasy football. So last episode, I talked to you a little bit about what it was, what the game is, what are the basics behind the game, right? And so now you're sort of interested. Yeah, that sounds great. I would like to play. So tell me my options. What are my options? How do I do it? Where do I go? Okay. So I'm going to start with sort of like the easiest option, and then I'm going to sort of move into some of the more like customizable options that offer a wealth and a variety of different settings and different ways to play the game. Okay. So first of all, many of you are probably familiar with the salary cap game that is offered by the Premier League itself, right? So the official game. Salary cap game, every player gets assigned a value, and you have however many hundreds of millions of dollars it is to try to make a team. And what ends up happening basically is that everyone around the world has 3 or 4 or 5 of the same players on their teams, right? And so this is why, another one of the reasons why we love this draft game, because only one player only one person in your league, one manager in your league is going to have this top elite player. Only one manager in your league can have this player who broke out this season. And maybe you picked him up and you were the only one to know about it. You were the only one to predict it. And now he's on your team. No one else can have him, right? So again, one of the reasons we love this. So the official game, right, with the salary cap, a lot of people are familiar with that. It's got millions of people who play that around the globe. Wildly popular game. If you want a fairly easy sort of transition into the draft game, well, the official Premier League does actually offer a draft version as well. Their scoring ends up being exactly the same as the scoring for the official game. So you'll find that on these draft platforms, a lot of the difference between them is actually going to be the scoring. It's going to be the way that these things are scored. So, with the official game, what you're going to find is that players receive points for, playing, a point here or there for playing. They're going to receive points for goals, for assists. They're going to receive points for clean sheets, various things like that. They'll receive deductions for yellow cards or goals conceded, those sorts of things. But that's really about the extent of it. There's not a ton of really what you would call extensive scoring. What you see on the pitch is not always necessarily indicative of what your player is going to score in the fantasy game. It's very straightforward. It's super what we call goal dependent, meaning that your player almost needs to score a goal or get a clean sheet to score a lot of points. But if you have played the official Premier League game, this is going to be a very easy transition for you and likely for your friends and your league mates, because if they've played that version as well, then this is going to be an easy way for them to sort of come over to this draft format, to this draft version, and maybe get their feet wet, kind of dip a toe in the water and see what it feels like. And then from there, we would probably encourage you, once you kind of get your legs under you, to explore a few more of the more in-depth options. One of the ones, some of the options where you can actually start awarding players points for a lot of the things that they do on the field that are not just scoring goals or assisting goals. Because we all know the world of football and a football match consists of much more than just goals and assists. And for a player to make an impact on the pitch, obviously, look at N'Golo Kante, right? A player like that. For a player to make an impact on the pitch, it doesn't always come in the form of goals and assists. So wouldn't it be nice if we could give them credit, fantasy credit, give your fantasy players fantasy credit in the form of points for doing things on the pitch that are not just goals and assists? Well, if you would like to go down that route, there are a couple of other options. So the first one I'm going to mention here is going to be Draft Fantasy. Search up Draft Fantasy. You will find it. I think it's .co.uk. But Draft Fantasy is a little bit different in that the default scoring for Draft Fantasy is very similar to the official Premier League scoring, right? So you are going to be getting those points for, kind of just the run-of-the-mill goals, assists, clean sheets, couple minutes played here and there, those kind of things, right? Subbing on, etc. So that's going to be the default scoring for Draft Fantasy for this website called Draft Fantasy. However, Draft Fantasy does offer customizable scoring. So this is going to be your first sort of foray into, okay, I want to actually start to award fantasy points for more of the things that happen on the pitch. How do I do that? Draft Fantasy does allow you to do that. They've offered now customizable scoring, which is one of their newer sort of features on their website. So same thing, set it up with your league mates, get them to go ahead and sign into Draft Fantasy, and once you're there, you will notice they have a really beautiful user interface. It's a very user-friendly site. The site is actually, very well run. It's gorgeous. It's intuitive, and they have an app that's actually fantastic as well. So these are the reasons why I do like Draft Fantasy. I would definitely recommend Draft Fantasy for leagues who are sort of, either you're used to the FPL game, the official game, or you want to sort of try something new, or even if you're a beginner, like I said, the user interface is definitely going to be friendly enough where you're going to be able to get your bearings. So the final option, and for right now, literally this is the last option. There really are only 3 sites or 3 platforms right now that are offering this draft game. So we sort of need to figure out, based upon your needs, based upon your desires, the things that you want from your league, what is it that you want to, or how deep do you want to go? Let's say that, right? So the last one is a site called Fantrax. And many people have heard this, even, people who play the official game have heard of this Fantrax game. It can be a little daunting, however, and this is why some people say, oh, no, that's too much for me. I promise you, if you're interested in this Fantrax format, which I'm going to explain in just a second, but if you're interested in it, there is more than enough support and help online to get you and your league set up, including all of the different options, the different customizable features. We can help you. The draft community can help you online because, and I'll say it, this is my preferred way to play the game. Because of the customization options, Fantrax for me is just by far the best way to play the game. And this is just because you can tailor it exactly to how you want the game to be. And if you don't like something, you can tweak it slightly for the next year and see how it goes, right? It gives you a wealth of options, like a vast, vast wealth of options. So your commissioner, though, is going to need to be willing to get used to the ropes, right? Get a lay of the land once they actually get logged into Fantrax. Because, to put it mildly, there is a bit of a learning curve for commissioners. To say that it's worth it, I think, is an understatement, because the different stat categories, especially, that you can assign to different players and different positions on the field, I think makes it worth it just right there. But then there's other options as well that also, I think, make Fantrax very worth it. For example, if your league wants to offer a cash payout and you want to offer the winner of the league a certain amount, of that cash payout, you can use what's called Fantrax Treasurer, which will store your money for you. It will collect the money from all the different members of the league, and the commissioner never has to touch that money. It never has to be in an account that, the commissioner or somebody else, the treasurer of the league, runs. No, instead, Fantrax holds that money in the Fantrax Treasurer account, and it's available. It's there whenever you want to dole it out to the winner or to the top 3 or whatever it is at the end of the season. You can go ahead and send that to those people. So another huge draw, I think, for Fantrax. Now, there's also options to customize the way that the league is set up, the structure of the league. If you want to have a co-manager, meaning you want 2 people to kind of share a team, you can do that. If you want to have separate, actual 2 separate divisions in one league, you can do that as well. If you want to have a cup tournament, right, that kind of runs and coincides with your season, you can do that. If you want to end your season in playoffs, you can do that. If you want to have a consolation cup, meaning that if certain players, let's say the top 4, make it to the semifinals and then the finals. Well, let's say you want to award the 5th through the 9th spot, 5th through the 8th spot, it would be, wouldn't it? 5th through the 8th spot. Math is hard. If you wanted to award the 5th through the 8th spot with an opportunity to have sort of a consolation cup to see who is the best of the rest, let's say, right? You can do that as well through Fantrax. So there's a lot of different options in Fantrax, and the major draw, of course, and I sort of alluded to it already, is the scoring. You can set any number of different scoring categories, and they are vast, I promise you. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they are incredibly, incredibly vast. Not only do you have assists, but one of the things, obviously, this being the Key Pass Collective, we love are key passes. But you can also award aerials. You can also award block shots. You can also award players for, saving penalties. You can award them Actually, you could deduct them for missing penalties. You can, like I said, it's basically you think of it, they've got it. I mean, it really is. It's pretty amazing that way. The stat categories are incredible. So, yeah, if you want a certain position on the field to be awarded for something that they do, whether it's an interception, whether it is a block shot, which is, one that is not used by a ton of people, but I really think that it should be used more, to be honest, because what a huge part of the game. But if you want to award block shots, if you want to award shots on target, if you want to award just shots in general, you can do that, even if it's not on target. If you want to award accurate passes, again, the list goes on and on. But Fantrax offers you the ability to do that. It also offers you what's called Fantrax default scoring. And Fantrax default scoring is sort of a version of the traditional Taga scoring. If you don't know what Taga is, that's okay. That's probably a separate podcast. But basically, Taga is kind of one of the reasons why we have draft fantasy football for the Premier League as it stands. Taga think of it as sort of like the godfather of the draft fantasy platforms, and unfortunately it did have to close due to financing concerns. But Taga gave us a scoring format that a lot of people look at as kind of one of the things they want to emulate in their leagues. Gives players scores for, like I said, aerials, key passes, interceptions, a lot of these things that that we find really make an impact on a game. And we want to see that reflected in our fantasy scores, right? And so you end up with a much more complex, but also much more interesting version and scoring of the particular fantasy game that you're in. And what you find that happens at that point is when you watch a game, you're actually able to notice the things that are happening on the field. And you'll see when a player is incredibly involved, they're actually racking up fantasy points as well, even if they're not assisting or scoring goals. And this is exactly what we want to see. When you've got a player who makes such an impact on the field, we want to see them scoring fantasy points as well, because you know in your gut that player is playing well, that player is scoring well. So you can use Fantrax default scoring if you'd like to. That's an option on Fantrax. And, just to put it out there, this is the format we play almost exclusively here at the Key Pass Collective, Key Pass Society. No, mixing the two names. Draft Society brings you the Key Pass Collective, which is this podcast. By the way, if you've not visited thedraftsociety.com, check it out. That is obviously our host site, our parent site, and has a wealth of information about the draft fantasy game. Okay, so anyway, this Fantrax scoring, I would recommend it, but it is going to take a little bit more of a learning curve. Like I said, there is support out there for you if you need it. There's support online. There's support on Twitter. You can reach out to us at the Key Pass Collective. You can reach out to any of the founders of the Draft Society, and you can reach out to just the community in general. Super, super helpful, super insightful, and just a really inclusive place. So, your three options essentially. You have the official Premier League game. They offer a draft format. The scoring is fairly basic, but if you want just a very easy intro to the game, that might be for you. That might be the way to go. You've also got Draft Fantasy, which offers a default scoring very similar to the official game, but it does have customizable scoring. And it's got a user interface that is really beautiful and really, really intuitive, and really fairly easy, user friendly. So you can also certainly look into Draft Fantasy. And then finally, the last one would be Fantrax. And Fantrax is by far the most customizable option. You can use the Fantrax Treasurer. You can use Fantrax default scoring. And again, if you want to continue listening to this podcast, especially once we get into this season and talk more about the analytics and talk more about strategy and trades and all those things, well, then we're going to be talking mostly about Fantrax default scoring on this particular podcast, and that might be helpful if you want to use that insight to be able to dominate your league. So Fantrax would be the final option. Definitely the one that I would recommend if you want to really get a feel for how rich this game can be. But again, no pressure. If you want to just dip your foot in the water, dip your toe in, and see how it feels, well then you can use any of the options, including the official games option, if you want to just have kind of like a nice little transition into the draft game before you really sort of decide whether or not you're going to be a diehard. So these are essentially your platform options when it comes to where do you play draft fantasy? Where do you play this draft Premier League game, right? Now, all of these, of course, are going to offer you the ability to have the draft, which is necessary. But again, one of the reasons why we play this game is draft day. Draft day is an absolute holiday. It's some of the most fun you're going to have. It's just enthralling. It's exciting. There's adrenaline through the roof. You'll be waiting to have, to take a certain player, and somebody will take that player right before you. And then sometimes you'll do the same to the guy right after you. So it really is just amazing. And once you experience one draft with your mates, really you sort of catch the bug. The game kind of gets under your skin and really really sort of makes you a fanatic. So yeah, I do hope that everybody gives it a shot, gives it a try, and using one of these platforms. We've used all three, so let us know which one you prefer. Let us know if you need any help or assistance with those, and we will be more than happy to reach out and sort of try to help you and direct you through if it's your first draft fantasy season, or if it's your 16th draft fantasy season. We're here to help. We're more than happy to lend that guidance. All right. So happy drafting, folks. I hope that you all do give it a shot, and please do tune in to the future episodes of the Draft 101 series. We're going to be talking about what are waivers. We're going to be talking about what are trades and how do I do them. We're going to be talking about all various different things that you need to be aware of when it comes to this draft fantasy game and this Premier League draft style of play. So thanks again for tuning in. I've been Joe Williams. This has been the Key Pass Collective Draft 101 series. Until next time, cheers.